She moved through the darkness with her gaze lowered, gripping a plastic container full of salvaged food. The evening air was frigid, and the urban landscape stretched on without end. Her footwear had deteriorated from use, her jacket insufficient against the piercing cold. Every stride required effort, yet she pressed forward because home wasn't truly a home. It was a dilapidated refuge on the outskirts of the city. Emily was her name. At 21 years old, struggle had etched marks across her features that aged her beyond her years. She had once pursued higher education with ambitious dreams, but after her mother's passing and her father's desertion of the family, she assumed full responsibility for her younger sibling. Aspirations were set aside, mere existence became her singular purpose. Each day she took on hours at a small restaurant. She wiped down surfaces, mopped the floors, and occasionally pleaded for additional shifts. Yet gratuities were scarce, and her earnings scarcely met the rental costs. Whatever she managed to preserve, she transported in plastic vessels, remaining portions that would serve as her brother's evening meal. This constituted her daily existence. What Emily remained unaware of was that on one unremarkable evening, as she brought those remnants homeward, her path would intersect with someone capable of transforming everything. On that same night, in another part of the city, a man called Richard was returning to his residence with his son, Michael. Richard held the position of chief executive, financially secure, well-regarded, recognized in corporate environments as someone defined by exactness and control. Still, his personal world bore the marks of tragedy. His spouse had died several years prior, leaving him as Michael's sole guardian. The child, now a decade old, possessed a contemplative nature, sharp awareness, and displayed a tenderness his father occasionally believed himself incapable of. Their vehicle moved through the poorly illuminated avenues. Richard's mind dwelled on a delayed business appointment. Michael, conversely, had his attention directed outward, observing life beyond the frosted window pane, and it was in that moment he noticed her, a young woman progressing with lowered head, cradling a container against her body as though it contained treasures beyond measure. Her movement was labored, her posture collapsed inward. She appeared delicate, yet resolute. Michael shifted forward. His youthful voice shattered the stillness. "Daddy, it's her." Richard raised his eyes, caught off guard by the sudden intensity in his child's inflection. "Who?" he inquired. "The girl," Michael murmured, his focus locked on Emily. "The one I mentioned to you. From the restaurant. She bought me dessert the other week, even though I came up short on payment." "That's her." Richard decreased their speed. He recalled his son speaking of a young woman who had shown him compassion during a visit to the establishment with a companion. She had compensated for his insufficient funds using her own earned tips. At that time, Richard had dismissed it as inconsequential. Yet now, witnessing her in this condition, the situation assumed greater significance. Emily continued onward, oblivious to the watching eyes. She veered into a narrow passage, securing the container more firmly. Richard brought the vehicle to a stop as the next chapter of her narrative unfolded wordlessly like an unscripted motion picture. Richard observed her vanishing into the darkness. A combination of intuition and concern propelled him ahead, contradicting the patterns of someone accustomed to measured decisions. He exited the automobile. Michael came after him, his tiny fingers clutching his father's outer garment. They entered the passageway. What confronted them was not a dwelling, but an improvised sanctuary constructed from cardboard sheets and aged fabric positioned against a damaged barrier. Emily's sibling, scarcely 13, awaited them there. His expression brightened upon seeing the nourishment. He seized it immediately, his hunger too overwhelming to mask his urgency. Emily offered him a weak smile, despite the fatigue weighing upon her countenance. She lowered herself beside him, drawing the jacket closer. Richard stood motionless. He had anticipated deprivation, perhaps difficulty, but not this, young lives persisting in obscurity, unseen by society. Michael spoke softly once more. "Daddy, we have to help her." What followed represented a conflict between impulse and prudence. Richard operated within a world of legal agreements, not benevolence. He possessed no experience with entering the circumstances of unknown individuals. Yet Michael's statement penetrated his uncertainty. He remembered his deceased wife, who had once counseled him that prosperity held no value if it remained isolated from human connection. On that evening, Richard reached a conclusion. He moved toward them. Emily's head jerked upward, alarm evident, as she drew her brother defensively near. Her expression revealed both apprehension and self-respect. She had limited exposure to generosity, particularly from well-dressed strangers. Richard's statement was direct. "You assisted my son previously. Now, permit me to assist you." Emily declined with a gesture. Dignity ignited within her. She had withstood considerable hardship already. She refused sympathy. However, Michael advanced closer, extending his palm toward her brother, who appeared dangerously underweight. Something innocent transferred between the young ones, a comprehension transcending language, and Emily understood that sometimes receiving assistance also demonstrates courage. The subsequent weeks brought comprehensive transformation. Richard secured proper lodging for Emily and her sibling. He facilitated her brother's re-enrollment in educational institutions. He presented Emily with consistent employment, not as charity, but as a role within his corporation's food service area. It provided her with self-worth, an opportunity to labor and reconstruct. Nevertheless, the adjustment proved challenging. Emily harbored years of adversity within herself. During nighttime hours, tears sometimes came, as she recalled her mother's guidance about enduring turbulent times. She felt anxiety about excessive indebtedness, about becoming an imposition. Yet whenever uncertainty emerged, Michael's expression of joy brought her back to that moment in the alleyway, the evening a child's declaration had stated, "Daddy, it's her." Who atu, as the weeks progressed into months, an implicit reality emerged. This transcended mere financial support or prospects. This concerned fundamental humanity. Richard recognized his personal anguish mirrored in Emily's fortitude. He had been deprived of a life companion. She had been deprived of parental figures. Both had been thrust into positions they never selected: guardian, sustainer, endurer. Through supporting her, he initiated the restoration of aspects within himself. Emily's brother flourished. For the initial occasion in years, he dressed in laundered clothing, transported educational materials to classes, and expressed aspirations of pursuing engineering. Emily herself resumed attending nocturnal instruction, resolved to complete what she had previously begun. Her palms, formerly weathered from relentless toil, now grasped writing instruments and academic texts, and Michael, he witnessed the progression with understated satisfaction. Within his consciousness, he understood that his uncomplicated words had altered not merely a single existence, but numerous lives. 2 months subsequently, on a luminous spring dawn, Emily positioned herself at the corporate dining facility where she currently served. She distributed meals with honor, no longer scraps conveyed in plastic receptacles. She observed Richard and Michael's arrival. Her sibling rushed toward them, expressing joy, unburdened for the first occasion in years. Emily hesitated, her vision moistening with appreciation. She had once transported refuse. Now she transported optimism, and the entirety had commenced because a small child peered through an automotive window and acknowledged compassion when he encountered it. Life does not consistently offer renewed opportunities, yet occasionally a singular gesture of empathy becomes the connecting element that mends fractured existences. Emily never dismissed the deprivation, the frigid conditions, the evenings of hopelessness. However, she equally never dismissed the instant Michael's utterance pierced the urban quietness. "Daddy, it's her." Before we conclude this narrative, we would appreciate hearing your perspectives. What significance did this story hold for you? Please express your sentiments in the comments below. In the final analysis, Emily's narrative was not centered on affluence nor on mere survival. It concerned acknowledgement, the instant when one individual perceives another, not as an obscure figure on the pavement, but as a spirit deserving preservation. And occasionally that acknowledgement originates from the most diminutive of voices.